everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel, and we are here today for part 2 of building a simple, easy platform. So for part 2, we're just going to focus on this corner where we're going to have a stony and rocky wall. The top piece is going to be flat so I can put the pieces on. I'm not going to put a whole bunch of details on that top piece just in case I decide to put another piece up there in the future. And then on the sides, the top piece, I would like for it to be rocks going down into a stony wall that leads into other parts of the carnival. Now we're going to just start with making the rocks first. And with this, I'm just going to take some scrap XPS foam that I had, and I'm just going to cut random pieces. It is not perfect. It is not designed to be cut in any particular way. I am just literally cutting out random pieces that I think would be like a nice rock size, kind of like boulders, if you're driving through the mountains and, you're alongside the road and you have these rocky mountain rocks coming at you. That's what I had in mind when making this piece. I will say that I underestimated this step 3 different times while trying to make this wall, where I thought I had cut out enough rocks, and then by the time the next step is carving them, and then the next step after that is gonna be gluing them on, and I ran out 3 different times. So basically, this whole sheet that you see of the XPF foam, it all became rocks in the end. I did not anticipate having to use that much foam, but either way, I'm glad that I had enough to be able to complete it. But just keep in mind that this next couple of steps is tedious to me because it's a lot of carving and a lot of making sure you have enough pieces. So let's get on to the next step. Let's start carving the rocks now. So if y'all seen my past videos, y'all know I love using a pocket knife. It's simple and it's easy to use. Um, so I'm just going to start chipping away at the top piece. So what I want to make sure is what side am I gluing down onto the back, because I want that piece to be flat. And then the top piece I want to start carving and not necessarily making it smooth. I want rough edges. It's a rock, so we want it to kind of give it texture like that. And I'm just going to sit here and keep notching and kind of putting some texture in there until I feel like it looks good. So once I get it to a spot where I think it looks good, I think it's looking like a rock, I'm going to start going through with an aluminum foil piece, just ball it up, and I'm going to use those sharp edges, which you'll see in a minute, of digging into that to give it more of a final rough rock look. Now, these little tiny textures really do matter because it's gonna pop through, and you're really gonna see it when I paint the rocks. And all those little key details matter, which is why my favorite foam to use is XPF. I would highly just use that because you can really get the details through on those rocks. So that first one looked good, and I'm just going to repeat the same steps for this second rock that I'm going to make. And so one thing to do while you're carving the rocks is we're going to keep all of the tiny little pieces, as you can see where I'm carving it right now, and I have these little chunks of pieces that, is trash, honestly, but we're not going to trash them just yet. And that's because we need them for fillers, and we'll get to that step later on. But keep all of that because it's going to come in handy in just a little bit. So all the rocks that I just made, I'm going to push them to the side and I'm going to start making the stony wall. And it is just I'm using a color pencil, but it doesn't matter exactly what you use. And I'm just going to make little rectangles and squares and make them like a stony brick wall. And I'm going through, and these is the bubble foam, right, where I use it from a package, so it's not the best to kind of carve into. So I did the pencil first, and then after I went through with the pocket knife and just lightly kind of cut a little bit deeper into it. That way I know when I get to the painting step, that texture is going to come through and I will be able to get the black paint into those little things to really accent the wall. But I'm just gonna kind of do this until I think it looks good. And of course, it does not have to look perfect. It does not have to be neat because this is going into a Halloween town. So the less perfect, the spookier and the better that it's gonna be. So I am not worried about getting it perfect. The only thing that I'm worried about is making sure that when I'm making the squares, I'm not making it all the way down, if that makes sense. I'm making sure that the bricks look shifted, like they're in a brick layered form. And I'm going to keep doing this until I think it looks good. Now, mind you, I actually have the platform flipped upside down. So even though you see me carve on the top, this is going to flip and that's going to be on the bottom part. It was just easier to make with the platform upside down. Now, I will say that I will take one section and bring that brick wall all the way up the wall, because I do want to add stairs. I'm not going to have time to do it this time, but at least I will be able to have that detail and have that backdrop. That way, no matter what size I make the stairs, it will have a good backdrop to it. So now let's get to gluing everything on. So we're going to start with the top piece and I'm going to glue that on with Mod Podge and I'm going to end up hot gluing the corners. And that's just because Mod Podge takes a while for it to fully dry and I want to kind of be able to put that top piece in place. So I'm just going to paint the Mod Podge on with like a paintbrush and then I'm going to sit that top piece down and then I'm just going to weigh it down with, like some candles or something that's a little heavy. That way it stays in place while I glue the rocks on. So one little tip that I didn't say before is that when I add this top layer on, right, and I had one stony layer go up all the way to the top, I will, for that one section, etch in brick layers up to the very top of the XPF foam. That way it joins all these pieces together. And then when we're gluing the rocks onto it, I'm also going to glue rocks in between the white and the purple foam. So once everything is painted, it's all the same. But you do want to make sure that once that top layer is added on, we're going to have the rest of the design go all the way up to that XPF foam on top to the very top layer. So I'm going to start hot gluing the rocks on and I'm just placing them. I have all these rock pieces and I'm just going to place them how some of the pieces fit in more perfectly than others. So I kind of want that. That way it doesn't leave huge gaps. It's okay if it does because I'm going to end up filling those gaps in, but you just want to eliminate that as possible. You want to be able to pack these rocks in as tightly as you can. That looks natural. And one key thing was that the XPF foam that I used was 1 inch. So sometimes I went through and I cut that in half and made 2 different rocks out of one piece, if that makes sense. I wanted to have some rocks coming more at you, and then I wanted some rocks to kind of be more settled in towards the background. So that also gives it a multi-dimensional layer, which makes it look a lot more natural. Now look, one little thing that you'll see is me fight my hot glue gun so much. I think I bought the right size glue for it, but it doesn't like that glue gun. So I'm not sure what happened, but I will not be buying that same one, which is the same type of glue that I got before. So I don't know, but just don't laugh at me. Like, this step is already tedious enough that you don't want to be fighting a hot glue gun trying to focus on where you're putting the rocks and how you're trying to place them and so forth. But I eventually got it together. Now the first side is done, which as you can see on the side, that's where my future staircase will go. So I didn't add rocks all the way over. And then I completed that first part. Now when I'm turning the corner, I kind of want to put the rocks a little bit over. That way it's going to turn that corner very nicely. So you don't want to put the end of the rock to the end of the foam piece. You want to extend that out some to match the bulkiness of the other rocks that have already been glued down. So all of the rock pieces are done, and as you can see, I kept all those scraps because we're going to go back through with those now, and we're going to fill in all the gaps that were left behind. And you don't have to trim these down. They're already trimmed down, right? They're just literally small scraps. So all I have to do is just take those pieces and glue them in between. So this is how it all looks together. As you can see, there's gaps in there, which is fine, but look at all the details, and it really does look like a rocky, stony wall, and I'm really happy of how it came out so far. And I wanted to get up close, that way you can see all the little cracks and the details because it's hard to see. And we're going to use those scraps, like I said, and put them into it, and that's going to be the next step. And I'm just kind of showing you how, like, I'll fill them in and how to place them around. So it is just random. It doesn't have to be perfect. We just want to fill in as much as I can. All right, so while you're using hot glue, let's do a public safety announcement because apparently I should have had one before doing this. I ended up hot gluing my finger, and oh boy, did that really hurt. And it got worse as the next couple of days went on. But because these pieces are so small, I put the hot glue on, and one thing led to another, and I said, ow. So just be careful while using hot glue. All right, so on to painting, and I'm going to start with a black base coat that is really going to get into all of the texture and all of the details. I want to get that black paint on there and all the texture as much as I can. If not, I will go back through with like a dark gray and what other colors, and it will be fine, but just I really want to make sure I get into all of the black paint. So I'm going to start off with a big brush first to really just kind of get it on there, and then I'll eventually go down, I think, like two more, like a medium paintbrush and then a really small fine to really get into all of the cracks and all of the indentions and all that kind of stuff to really make sure that this is getting a solid base black coat on top. Painting took some time as well because, it's kind of tedious. You want to make sure you have all the little pieces. Sometimes it looks like I got it all, and then when I switched sides and went back, I was like, oh wow, I missed more than what I thought. And, so I went back through a couple of times just to make sure that I got every little piece of the foam painted. So I wanted to kind of give a comparison of how the medium paintbrushes were and then taking a really fine paintbrush and really getting into, you can see using the smallest little paintbrush you can find will really get into all of the little indentions, especially with the bubble foam and the package foam. That to me was a little bit more harder, and trying to make sure that I get that black paint in between all of those, so the brick layers are really going to pop out once we add the other colors onto top of the black paint. Now that the black paint is on, I'm going to start painting the rocks and then the stony wall. So I'm going to use 3 different paints of gray, and I'm going to use a dark gray, medium gray, and then a really light gray. So for the first one, we're going to use a dark gray, and that's going to be basically like a second base paint for the rocks and the stones. I want them to be covered 90%. So I still want some of that black to come through, especially on that stony wall. The black in all the indentions where we carved the walls, I still want that to mostly be black, just because it will pop through and give more of a definition of all of the bricks. And then for the rocks, same thing. I kind of want them like 90% covered, show a little bit of the black coming through. So how I'll do that is not globbing the paint on there. What I want to do is stick the paintbrush in the paint and then dab it. And then just kind of lightly go through. If there's a couple of spots that you can see that might have a little bit more paint, it's fine. It's a wall. It's going to look natural in the end. And I'm just gonna kind of repeat this until I feel like I have a nice layer of this dark gray rock. Sometimes I'll let it dry for a couple of minutes and then kind of come back just to see, because right now it's really light as you're painting it on, but then once it dries, it kind of settles and it goes a little bit darker. So that's kind of a tip to do as well, is that you put it on there. You might have to do 2 coats of a paint. I think for this one I did for the gray. I went through. By the time I was done with the other side, I came back to this first side and reapplied another layer of that dark gray. But it is just based on how you want your rocks and everything to look. So this is what the dark gray looks like as it's I think I did 2 coats of that, and it's solid. I still see some of that black coming through. But now we're gonna go to the next medium gray, and this is gonna be used as like a highlight, and I say that as in like a medium highlight. So I want to be careful of how I put this on. I do not want to glob this on because this is going to be a shade lighter than what we just used, so it's gonna give more of a dimension of the rocks. So I'm going to kind of like dip the paintbrush into the paint and then really make sure I dab it. That way I don't get a glob of paint onto the rocks or the stones. And I'm just going to highlight till I feel like it looks good to me, where it's not fully covering what I had already done, the black and the dark gray. I still want those colors to somewhat pop through. So this is just like a medium highlight. So now with that medium highlight, you can start seeing the texture really pop through, especially on the rocks. And now that we're going to use the second highlight, we're going to use this very little amount because this light color will pop, and you don't want it to pop too much because then it will just kind of overwhelm the texture instead of highlighting it. So be very, very careful when adding this. I like to add it to like corners or to like highly textured areas just so it will pop through. So like I said, this really light gray really adds all the accent to it. And I think what I was doing was pointing out the difference of textures between the XPF foam and the package foam on the bottom where it was like beaded. But that, and I just wanted to give a closer look to it. It's kind of hard to see sometimes on the camera of how it looks so up close because you kind of lose a little detail while you're looking at it far away. But so I'm just going to keep adding these highlights until I feel like it's good. Now that I'm done with the rocks and the stones, I want to focus on the top layer. And you see the previous platform that I have done before. I want to make it similar to that so it matches and flows. So I'm going to use a dark green color. Now I'm going to put this green color along the outside, and then I want to use more of a tan color going in, like for dirt and sand kind of look. So I'm just going to add that in. I'm just going to pour it on top. Just be careful when doing that. You don't get it too close to your rocks and then paint your rocks green. I think I did that like on one little spot, but that's okay. I just went back through, and I'm going to end up blending that more. But let's just focus on doing this first. So I'm going to add this on and then just kind of work it into the top. I just want to make sure that there's no glob of paint kind of sitting on top. I want to kind of smear it out and spread it so that way it's not too heavy. Now that I put the green, I want to go through with a dark brown and kind of start mixing that together. I want, the sandy, muddy kind of look. So when I first put this color on there, I want to put it on the spot that there is no green and just have the brown on there. That way, then after that is done, is distinguished between the green and the brown, and then I will take my paintbrush and then I will start to blend the two colors together. Now, if you put a little bit too much color on there, as you can see, I will kind of dab it on a tissue paper and then go back through when blending, just because I don't want one color to dominate the other and I still want a really nice blended look. So for this, there's really no technique to it. It's just me going back and forth and just kind of smearing the two colors until I feel like it looks good for me and the vision that I have for the top. Then sometimes, as you saw, I'll kind of go back and maybe put a little bit more of the brown or whatever color to make it where I want it to be. The dirt part looking the brown paint was a little less than what I wanted, so I just brung that out a little bit more. Now that I'm done with my green and my dark brown, I want to add in texture to the wet paint. Now it is wet. I do not want it to dry before I do this. I want to do this on wet paint. But what I'm going to do is take like a paper towel and I'm going to just blot on the paint. For me, I think this makes it look like a good texture, like a grassy texture. It's not much, but I feel like it looks better than just to have streaks of the paint from the paintbrush going by. So I'm going to add this in. That way it gives more of a grit to the ground. Now that's finished, I'm going to go back through and I'm going to add a little bit more gray along the sides. You know how I said earlier where I put the green a little bit too close to the rocks? I was like, I don't like that. So let me blend a little bit of that leftover gray that I have and just kind of blend it in nicely with the grass. Kind of like how when grass grows over stone walls and etc. So that's kind of the idea for blending the gray, and the green. Now I'm gonna let that dry for a little bit, and I'm gonna go through with one more color, and that's gonna be a light tan color, and that's gonna be more of like a sandy accent to like this grass, muddy grass that I have going on the top. And then because I've already dabbed the other two colors and made this grit look, I want to make sure that I keep that same texture, and I'm not going to paint gliding through on top, if that makes sense. I'm going to just dab this color on there until I feel like it looks good. So as you saw, it was okay to kind of throw the paint on there and then just take it from there and then just dab it and start blending it in that way. So now the painting stage is done. This is how the top looked like. I really like the dabbing technique that I use. I did not use that on my previous platforms, and to me it made a little bit of a difference just because that extra texture really does go a long way when you're looking at your village from up close. And then those are how the rocks look like with everything, dried, and it looks really good, and I'm happy with how it turned out. Now after all the paint has dried, I'm going to go through and I'm going to add moss. And I'm just going to randomly put it in different places. I want to kind of put them on top of the platform. I want to put them in between the rocks, underneath the rocks, a little bit like towards the stony walls. So wherever I just feel like I want to add some moss, I'm not going to go super heavy on it just because I don't want it to take away from all of the pretty like paint that I did with the rocks and the stones. So now it is all complete, and this is what the stone rocky hill corner, whatever you want to call it, this is how it turned out, and it turned out way better honestly than than I thought I was going to do because I've never made anything like this. So if you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to see part 3 of finishing the platform.